Hey, Hillside Church, Pastor Matt here. And this last week we missed Sunday because of the snow day, but the message was so important that we felt like we'd do a short video for you. As most of you know, we were talking about cantaloupes the week before, and we were going to continue talking about cantaloupes. But before we do that, I needed to tell you a little story. I think most of you know that I own a dog. At least I think I own a dog. I mean, you know Timmy the dog. But you know, the thing is, when Timmy wants to go out, he gets me and I let him out. And when Timmy's hungry, I have to feed him. And when I go to work for 8 hours a day, Timmy sleeps at home. And so sometimes I wonder who really is the owner in this situation. Sometimes I think Timmy owns me because I do all the work and he gets all the pleasure. But you know, I think sometimes we get things confused. And when we were talking about cantaloupes last week, you know, we talked about everybody has cantaloupes. We just have different amounts of cantaloupes, and we all own cantaloupes. But I think one of the things that we do is sometimes our cantaloupes own us. We get so focused on how many cantaloupes we have, or how nice our cantaloupes are, or how many cantaloupes we need in order to live the life that we want, we forget that all the cantaloupes are God's. And I think what God has done is He has given us a way to remember that He owns it all. And that's what we call the tithe. The tithe is an Old Testament principle. The tithe actually means a tenth. And what He said to the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, was to give back to me in order to run my kingdom, in order to run my priesthood. I need a tenth of what you make. Now, a lot of people have talked a lot of different ways about the tithe, but we're just going to stick with just that word tenth. Jesus never preached against the tithe, and He never changed the tithe. So we basically believe the tithe kind of just keeps going. As a matter of fact, basically what Jesus said is, those who give are blessed. You may remember the parable of the widow's mite, where many wealthy people were coming through and dropping their money in the offering plate, making a lot of noise, and all of a sudden a small widow came through and she dropped her mite in, and Jesus stopped everything that was going on and said, "See that one? She gave the most because she gave more of what she had than all of the wealthy people." So he taught us to be generous people. And the reason I think He did that was so that our stuff wouldn't own us, and we would know that it's just stuff. So with our cantaloupes, you know, what God says is, I've given you a bunch of cantaloupes, and I ask that you give one cantaloupe back. And that cantaloupe should go to, we believe, the local church. Now, you may give to other areas and other places, but God wants your tithe to be to your church, to the local church. And so one of the things that I get asked a lot is, what does that look like? What does the tithe look like when it comes to Hillside Church? And so what we thought would be interesting is we'd show you. So here we go. Let's say this cantaloupe is Hillside Church's budget. The whole thing, right? So what I thought we should do is we should show you. Well, the first thing we do is we ourselves as a church want to give a tithe. So we take 10%. And we give that to help with overseas missions, and also to help with our local district to do church planting and different initiatives like that. So that's where straight out a tenth goes. Now, this next section, which is roughly about a third, it's 27% of our cantaloupe. That right there goes to keep the lights on. That's what we pay in heating and oil and any taxes that we might have to pay for property, or just to basically keep the doors on, keep the lights on, so that we can just hold church. So that's about 27%. Now, the next chunk is a little bit larger, and that is 45%. This is the salaries we pay to our pastors. Which is a large chunk, but actually it's a smaller percentage than most churches spend on salaries. But it's about 45% to go to pay our pastors here. And then we have this piece right here. This piece is the amount of money that we have left over to do ministry. So that would be buying snacks for the youth group, that would be a Good Friday experience, anything we do decorating, any Easter things or anything like that is 18% of our ministry. Now, we can say that a lot of ministry happens because of our pastors, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But this is such a small number compared to what we would like to do. Now, this is our general budget that you see. Now, here's the great thing that I can tell you. Our building cost is set. It's not going to go up. Our salary cost is set. this is where all of our extra funds go. So the more that our budget is allowed to grow, the more ministry that we can do. But that ministry is dependent on our pastors. Now, we have several pastors, as you know. They don't all make the same amount, but they all do different things. As we have a children's pastor, we have Beth who does worship and women, we have Gio, and we have myself. Now, I want to tell you just a little story about each of these that talks about what they are able to do because of your tithes and offerings allow them to be pastors of Hillside Church. I asked each of them for some stories. Here's what Tamsin said. Tamsin said that when she first came on to being a pastor, because she came from being a stay-at-home mom and it was her first entry into ministry, she was a little nervous that moms would, pull away from her and not embrace her because now she was a pastor and she was holy and they couldn't be friends with her. But what she found out was, yes, there was a little bit of pulling away, but she also noticed that when she was with groups of moms, there would be that one mom that would stay behind and that would come over to her and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And would share with her the burdens or the trials that she might be facing as a mother, as a woman, or as a wife. And she found that being a pastor opened up this new world of ministry to her as an individual, to the moms around her, both at Little Sparrows and Pleasantville where she lives, and at Hillside Church as well. Gio, our youth pastor. Some of you don't know this, but Gio does work with our students and he has a pretty intense relationship with them. But something happened last year where one of the students who was coming to our youth group actually got into trouble with the authorities. Actually, the police were called to come to his house. And Gio was the first person that this student called. And so Gio was the first one on the scene to embrace this young man and to talk to him about what had happened and what he had done that had called for the authorities to be called to his home. And so Gio was there to minister to him and say, hey, it's okay, you've done something, you're going to get over it, you're going to be forgiven. But Gio was allowed to do real life ministry to this child in crisis, in the moment of his crisis. And that's all because of the tithes and offerings that you give to Hillside Church. Now Beth, what can we say about Beth? All of you will know how amazing that Beth is. But Beth has created at Hillside Church such a safe place and an incubator for our women leaders. We have so many female interns that come and learn, and Beth works with them and develops them. One in particular was one of our worship leaders who, when she came to us, she was immensely talented, incredibly intelligent, but was afraid of her own shadow sometimes, it seemed. She was timid and she was fearful. Beth came alongside of her and worked her to build her up and to strengthen her as a woman and as a believer and then as a worship leader. And as she was with us, she grew to such an extent that she became an amazing worship leader and really grew in her faith as a woman of God. And that's all because Beth invested in her, and she could do that because you invested in Beth. Me, I'm the lucky one. I get to watch all of this. I get to see all of these interns and see all these amazing people and lead this team that is incredible. And it's all because of your tithes, your gifts, your offerings. So what we do with what you give to us is make ministry happen. We build the kingdom of God with your generosity. There's no special person who's giving us a ticket or paying our way. There's no big church or no big bank account. It's just us. It's the family. And it's you being generous to Hillside Church that allows us to accomplish the ministry that God has put before us. So your tithe is not a small thing. Your percentage that you bring to God, we do the best we can with it in order to make sure we honor God and we glorify His name. We live off the verse, may people see the good deeds that you do and glorify your Father in heaven. So that's what we have for you today. We start Missions Week next week. We have 2 weeks with missions, and I hope you can join us. It's going to be a fantastic time. We'll see you Sunday.